The junk sector of Xerion Prime was loud, hot, and full of smoke. Old engines sparked, broken droids groaned, and poor workers moved through the dust like shadows. No one looked up. No one talked much. And Jarek, a human mechanic, liked it that way. He had a workshop at the edge of the scrapyard, barely standing, tools rusted, and only one working light. But it was home. He fixed alien tech for cheap, gave honest work, slept on a cot behind an engine core, and said little about his past. People called him the Broken Man, not because of his limp, but because of his eyes. One evening, after a long day of fixing heat coils, Jarek was walking back through the dump trail when he heard breathing, not normal breathing, heavy, animal. He followed the sound through twisted metal piles and fallen crates. Then he saw it, a cage, large, thick bars, hidden in shadows. Inside it was a beast, not just any beast. It was an albino Xerion werewolf, twice the size of a hoverbike with snow-white fur, glowing red eyes, and metal wiring embedded in its spine. It was chained, wounded, and barely breathing. Its name was Snowfire, and it was a forbidden creature, said to be loyal only to the Empress herself. Jarek took a slow step forward. Others would have run. He didn't. He looked into the beast's eyes. The wolf growled low but didn't rise. "It's okay," Jarek said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The wolf stared back. Jarek reached into his satchel and pulled out a water flask. He poured some into a metal tray near the bars. Snowfire didn't move. "Drink," Jarek whispered. Still nothing. Then, one paw moved, slow, then the other. Snowfire crawled to the tray and drank. Jarek knelt beside the cage, quiet and still. "You've been forgotten too, huh?" he muttered. Suddenly, a voice shouted from above. "Step away!" Jarek turned and saw two palace guards running toward him. One raised a shock spear. "That beast belongs to the royal line. You'll be punished for even touching its cage." Jarek raised his hands. "I didn't do anything, just gave it water." "You think it matters?" the guard snapped. But before they could strike him, something happened. Snowfire stood, its fur bristled, its red eyes glowed brighter, and it let out a deep rising growl. The guards froze. Jarek didn't move. Snowfire stepped forward. Chains clanged behind it. Its massive head lowered beside Jarek, and to everyone's shock, it sat down, like a loyal dog beside its master. The guards stared in disbelief. One whispered, "It obeyed. A human." Jarek looked confused too. He slowly stood, unsure what just happened. Far above, on a balcony of black stone, someone watched from behind a glowing curtain. Her robe shimmered with stars. Her eyes were cold and sharp. She was Empress Virella, and her sacred beast, the one who once refused to bow to her enemies even under torture, had just obeyed a junkyard human. She turned to her advisor and said coldly, "Bring the human to the palace. Do not harm him. Yet." That night, Jarek returned to his workshop, but he wasn't alone. Snowfire followed him, through the city, through the steam tunnels, through the gates of steel. People cleared the streets, children screamed, vendors hid, behind stalls. A forbidden war beast walking beside a human impossible. But it happened. And Jarek, still silent, opened his door and said only one thing. "Guess you live here now." Snowfire lay down beside the workbench, tail curling around. It sighed. For the first time in years, Jarek smiled, just a little. But in the palace, orders were being written, swords were being sharpened, and the Empress sat on her throne, eyes glowing. She whispered to herself, "If the beast kneels to him, then what else will?" By morning, the story had already spread through half the capital. The Sacred Wolf follows a human. The Empress's pet has bowed to a mechanic. The human speaks beast language. None of it was true, yet none of it was false either. In his small junk shop, Jarek sat cross-legged eating stale bread while Snowfire, the great albino Jarian wolf, rested beside him, calm as moonlight. But he could feel it. The world outside was no longer ignoring him. The peace didn't last. Just after sunrise, the door was kicked open. 3 guards entered in royal armor, tall, proud, faces hidden under bronze masks. They didn't raise weapons. They didn't need to. Snowfire stood, immediately, teeth bared, growling low. The lead guard raised a hand. "By order of Empress Varela, you are summoned to the royal court." Jarek blinked. "Why?" "She wants to see her beast," the guard replied. Jarek looked down at Snowfire. "You heard them," he said. "Guess we've been invited." To cue. Everyone's surprise. Snowfire wagged its tail. The royal palace was nothing like the scrapyard. Polished silver floors, giant glowing banners, alien nobles in silk and gold. As Jarek walked beside the massive beast, whispers followed him. "That's the human. Look how it protects him. He must be using forbidden tech. Or ancient magic." He kept his head down, calm, but inside his heart was racing. Then the gates opened. The Empress waited. Varela sat upon her high throne, cold eyes sharp as blades. Dozens of court members stood in rows, silent, watching. Snowfire paused at the entrance, then walked calmly forward. Not toward her, toward Jarek, and sat right at his feet. The whole hall gasped. The Empress stood. "You have no right to touch that creature," she said. Her voice was like ice. "I didn't touch it," Jarek replied. "It chose to follow me." She stared at him. "That beast is sacred. It fought beside me in the war. It never bowed to anyone, even under torture." "I didn't ask it to bow." "Then why does it obey you?" Jarek looked at Snowfire and simply said, "Because I listened." Whispers spread through the court. The Empress walked down from her throne, her silver gown trailing behind her. She stepped directly in front of Snowfire. "Do you remember me?" she asked softly. Snowfire looked at her, but didn't move. Varela's jaw tightened. "In the war," she said, turning to Jarek, "I gave it everything. Armor, orders, glory, and yet it never trusted me." Jarek shrugged. Maybe it wanted something else. The Empress stared into Snowfire's glowing red eyes, then said, "Prove your loyalty now. Tear this human apart." Gasps echoed across the court. Snowfire growled low, but not at Jarek, at Varela. Its claws dug into the floor. Its body rose, one step forward, toward the Empress. Jarek placed a hand on the wolf's back. "Easy," he said softly. Snowfire froze. The tension broke. Then slowly, it sat back down, at Jarek's feet, not angry, not afraid, just loyal. The Empress turned away quickly, hiding the look in her eyes. Was it shame, regret, or fear? No one could say. She raised her hand. "The mechanic will stay in the guest wing. Feed him, watch him. And the wolf?" a noble asked. She answered coldly, "Let it decide." Later that night, Jarek sat alone in a beautiful room of smooth walls and glowing crystal windows. He looked at the food tray left untouched beside him, then heard something heavy push the door open. Snowfire entered, head low, tail flicking. Jarek smiled. "You found me." The wolf curled beside his bed, let out a soft breath and closed its eyes. Jarek leaned back and whispered to no one, "I don't know what you are, Snow, but I think you're the only real thing in this world." Outside, on the highest tower, Empress Varela stood in silence. Her advisor stepped beside her. "He is just a mechanic. Shall we remove him?" She didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on a memory of a battle, of Snowfire charging into flames, refusing to leave her side. Until the betrayal. "He's not just a mechanic," she said at last, then whispered, "He's the first one the beast has forgiven." The royal court had turned into a whispering storm. A mechanic, a low-born outsider from the junk sectors, had become the center of attention, not by wealth, not by power, but because a forbidden beast had chosen him, and that beast, Snowfire, the Sacred Albino Wolf, had once been the pride of the Xerian throne. Empress Varela sat alone in her memory chamber, a place where only she could enter. Images of the past floated around her, glowing shapes of fire and shadow, built from light and thought. She tapped one. A younger version of herself appeared, smiling as she rode Snowfire into battle. Together, they had crushed rebellions, burned enemy ships, and won a war that almost destroyed her empire. But there was one memory she could never erase: the betrayal. She had ordered Snowfire into a burning outpost to hold the line while she escaped. The wolf obeyed and nearly died. Its body had returned, blackened, bleeding, its loyalty unshaken. But in its eyes, something had changed. It never looked at her the same again, and so she locked it away and never visited, not once, until now. Back in the palace arena, Jarek stood awkwardly as nobles surrounded him with questions. What spell did you use? Did you hack its neural link? Are you controlling it somehow? Jarek just shook his head. I gave it water. They laughed, some with disbelief, others with nervous fear. But when Snowfire padded into the arena and sat silently beside him, no one dared laugh again. Lady Maris, a high noble in crimson robes, stepped forward. Words are cheap, human, she hissed. We need proof. If the beast obeys you, then let it pass a test. Jarek frowned. What kind of test? She smirked. One of blood and fear. Later that evening, the Empress summoned Jarek alone. He entered a stone chamber lit only by fire. Crystals. She stood at the far end beside a steel gate. You've made my court nervous, she said coldly. Jarek folded his arms. Not my fault they're scared of their own pet. She turned, face unreadable. Snowfire was never a pet. It was bred in fire, trained to kill on command. It knew only battle, until I betrayed it. Her voice cracked, just for a second. Jarek said nothing. She pointed to the gate. Behind that door is one of our war drones, fully armed, programmed to attack anything it sees. If Snowfire truly obeys you, it will not let you die. Jarek's jaw tightened. You want me to fight a killer machine with a wolf? No, she said, you just have to survive. The test began at sunrise. The entire court gathered above the pit arena, stone walls, energy barriers, and a single metal floor below. Jarek stood in the center. Snowfire waited beside him, tail flicking, body tense. The gate opened. A giant war drone stepped out, 6 legs, glowing weapons, steel fangs. Its eyes locked onto Jarek. Then, it attacked. The crowd leaned forward. Blades spun. The machine roared, but before it could strike, Snowfire moved. A blur of white, faster than a whisper. Its claws dug into the drone's armor, ripping metal apart. It leapt again, knocking the beast off balance. Then it stood over Jarek, fangs bared, ready to die for him. Stop the test, someone shouted, but no one needed to. The drone was down, smoke rising, sparks flying. Snowfire had protected the human. Without hesitation, Empress Varela stood slowly. She looked at Jarek, then the wolf, then the watching nobles. Her voice was quiet, but cold as steel. The beast has chosen, and that choice is not me. That night, as stars rose over the capital, Jarek sat outside the guest wing, looking up at the sky. Snowfire lay beside him, head resting on its paws. I don't get it, Jarek said. You were royal. You were feared. Why me? The wolf opened one eye, then closed it again. It didn't need to answer. In the shadows of the upper tower, the Empress watched them both. For the first time in her reign, she felt something strange. Not anger, not pride, but loss, and maybe a little bit of guilt. She whispered into the dark. That human didn't steal you. I threw you away. The royal court could no longer deny it. The sacred albino beast, Snowfire, obeyed no royal command, no ancient code, only the word of a human mechanic from the outer scrap zones. Jarek, quiet and unpolished, had become a living symbol of something the Jarian elite feared the most: change. But loyalty, the Empress believed, must be proven twice. Once by instinct, and once by pain. The morning sky was dark with storm clouds when Jarek received the summons. 2 guards escorted him through cold stone corridors beneath the palace, deeper than before. Older. The walls here had no glow panels, only burning torches flickering over old metal doors. Snowfire followed close, silent as ever. Jarek kept one hand on its neck, unsure where they were going. The lead guard finally stopped and opened a heavy vault door. Inside stood Empress Virella, but she was not alone. Across from her stood a tall warrior, cloaked in black armor, his face hidden by a dragon-shaped helmet. He was called Karn Vol, a blood champion. A man bred for war, raised to feel nothing but victory, and beside him was another war beast snarling and drooling with rage. A prototype larger than Snowfire, red scales covering its mechanical spine. This, the Empress said, is a final test. Jarek stared. You want a fight? She nodded. Not just a fight, a choice. In the center of the chamber, 2 stone platforms rose from the floor. On one, a steel cage was waiting for Snowfire. On the other, a cage for Jarek. You will both be trapped, the Empress said coldly. The enemy beast will be released. Only one of you can be saved. Jarek's eyes widened. You're forcing Snowfire to choose? Yes. If it saves you, it dies. If it saves itself, you die. She looked straight at him. That is loyalty. Not tricks, not bonds, but death. Jarek turned to Snowfire. The great wolf stared at him, then walked calmly into the cage. Jarek did the same. Locks slammed shut. Energy fields buzzed between them. Then, the enemy beast was released. It charged into the chamber, eyes red with madness. Karn Vol shouted in Jarian language, ordering it to kill. It sniffed the air, saw both cages, growled with confusion. Then it spotted Jarek. It crouched low, ready to pounce. Snowfire let out a deep, rising growl, but the cage held it back. Jarek gritted his teeth. He didn't scream, didn't beg, just looked at Snowfire. I know what you'll do, he whispered. I'd do the same for you. The beast lunged, and just before impact, Snowfire roared. Not just a sound. It was like thunder shaking the stone. Then, to everyone's horror, Snowfire threw itself against the cage wall, again and again, until the energy sparked and the metal bent blood poured from its side. Jarek shouted, Stop! No, don't! But it didn't. One last crash, and the cage door broke. Snowfire leapt forward, straight into the path of the charging beast. The 2 collided with a sound like a comet strike. Fangs tore, metal scraped, fire blasted. Jarek's cage shook from the force. The beasts rolled across the floor, blood flying in every direction. But when the dust cleared, only one stood. Snowfire. Wounded. Burning. But alive. Jarek's cage opened. He ran straight to the wolf, falling to his knees. You fool, he whispered, tears in his eyes. You should have saved yourself. Snowfire leaned forward and licked his face. Up above, Empress Virella watched silently. For the first time in years, her voice shook. It chose him. Again. The nobles around her said nothing. Not one dared question what they had seen. Not after that. Later that night, Jarek sat with Snowfire under the stars. He wrapped the beast's wounds with bandages. His hands were shaking. You could have died, he whispered. Snowfire rested its head in his lap. Jarek looked up at the dark sky. I think you were made for war, he said softly. But I think you were born for something more. Far above in her private chambers, the Empress stared into a crystal screen, replaying the moment again and again. The wolf had been loyal, brave, terrifying, but only for him. She whispered into the silence. He passed every trial. And now, I must face my own. The wounds healed slowly. Snowfire's white fur was stained with red. Jarek's hands stayed wrapped in cloth, fingers sore from pulling broken metal out of the wolf's side. He didn't sleep much. He barely ate. But he didn't leave Snowfire's side, not once. In return, the great beast rested its head near Jarek's chest, rising and falling with every breath he took. Guards passed by the guest wing and whispered, "He treats it like family." Servants whispered back, "It treats him like a brother." And in the dark halls of the palace, jealousy began to grow. The Empress sat on her moonlit throne, silent for hours. No court, no music, no distraction, only the memory of Snowfire's roar as it broke its cage to save the human. She had never been saved like that. Never once. And now, the court began to speak behind her back. The beast no longer answers to her. The mechanic is gaining power. What if the people begin to admire him? That was when Lord Thalik moved, a high noble, proud, cruel, loyal only to his own name. He walked through the halls that night with one goal: remove the human and make it look like an accident. Jarek was on his way back from the healing garden. Snowfire was recovering in the courtyard under close guard. Jarek passed a shadowed hallway when something slammed into his side. Hard. A stun baton. He collapsed, pain burning in his ribs. Two masked nobles grabbed him, dragging him into a storage chamber. Lord Thalik stepped in, face calm. "Don't worry, mechanic, you'll be remembered as a brave guest who vanished." Jarek coughed. "Coward." Thalik smiled. "Maybe, but dead men don't speak." In the courtyard, Snowfire lifted its head sharply. Something was wrong. It rose, slow at first, then suddenly alert. The guards tried to stop it. Snowfire ignored them. Its nose twitched, its eyes burned red, and then it ran. Inside the storage room, Jarek was tied to a pillar. Thalik leaned forward, holding a blade. "Say goodbye, human." Suddenly, crash. The wall exploded inward. Stone and dust flew everywhere. A white blur of fury leapt through the hole. Fangs first. Snowfire struck like lightning. One noble flew across the room, hitting the wall. The other tried to run. He didn't make it. Thalik raised his blade. But Snowfire stood between him and Jarek now, growling deep and low. Thalik backed away, shaking. "You're just an animal." Snowfire stepped forward and did not growl again. It simply stared and waited. Footsteps echoed. Guards, then nobles, then the Empress herself. She saw the broken wall. She saw the human, bleeding. She saw Thalik trembling before the beast, and she understood everything. Thalik dropped to his knees. "Your Majesty, this was a misunderstanding." She didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on Jarek, then on Snowfire, then back to Thalik. "You tried to harm the only soul my beast still trusts," she said coldly. She drew her blade. "That is not a mistake. That is treason." One quick strike. Thalik fell. The room went quiet. Later, Jarek sat on the balcony overlooking the valley. Snowfire rested beside him. The Empress approached silently. "I owe you an apology," she said. Jarek shook his head. "Not me, him." She knelt beside Snowfire. Slowly, carefully, and placed her hand on his fur. Snowfire didn't bite, didn't growl, but he didn't lean in either. The bond was broken, but not erased. Varela whispered, "You were always more than a weapon." She looked at Jarek. "And so are you." That night, she made her decision. In the throne room under the banners of flame and steel, Empress Varela spoke to the entire palace. "I will step down. Let the people choose new leadership. And let the protector of the sacred beast be free of chains, forever." Jarek didn't want power. He didn't want a title. He just wanted peace. and Snowfire. As the sun rose the next morning, word spread across the stars. The Empress gave up her crown, and all because the heart of her empire no longer beat for war. It beat for something else now: loyalty, friendship, forgiveness. The palace of Jarian had never been this quiet. No horns, no guards shouting orders, no nobles rushing to flatter the throne, only silence. Because for the first time in centuries, an empress was about to step down. Not in defeat, not by force, but by choice. And the reason? A wounded beast who followed a human, a mechanic who never wanted power, and a single moment of truth. Jarek stood at the back of the grand court. He didn't wear armor or robes. No crown, no title, just a grease-stained shirt and patched boots. Beside him, Snowfire sat proudly, healed, quiet, watching. Nobles lined the sides of the hall. Soldiers stood still, unsure of what came next. The Empress walked to the center. She removed her silver headpiece slowly and placed it on a stone pedestal. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed years of weight. "I once ruled by fear," she began, "with fire, war, and pride, but fear cannot raise peace. And pride cannot fix what love has broken." She looked at Snowfire, then at Jarek. "I betrayed the one creature who gave me everything, and in doing so, I lost not just a beast, but myself." The hall stayed silent, until she said 3 final words. "I step down." The nobles gasped. One even shouted, "This is madness. You cannot just leave." She turned to him. "I am not leaving, I am making room for something new." She pointed to the center of the hall and said, "Let the people choose. Let their voices rise louder than my name." That night the capital was filled with noise again. Not war, not fire. Hope. Some cheered. Some protested. Many simply watched the stars, unsure what tomorrow would bring. But deep in the inner quarters, Jarek sat in a quiet chamber, fixing a broken heat fan. He didn't want to lead. He didn't want attention. He only wanted Snowfire safe. And for the first time in years, the beast slept soundly, curled beside him like a loyal shadow. But peace is never left alone for long. In the far reaches of the city, something stirred. A forgotten general, Tarn Zek, once loyal to the Empress, now furious. He had lost favor, lost command. And now, with her throne abandoned, he saw an opening. She gave it all up for a human and a pet? He growled. Then let's see how they handle fire, without her protection. By morning, Jarian skies were filled with smoke again. Tarnzek's rogue battalion, ships, walkers, and bio-soldiers, marched toward the palace. The people panicked. The Empress, now wearing simple robes, watched from a tower. "They're coming for him," she said quietly. "And for Snowfire." A former advisor asked, "What will we do?" She turned, eyes sharper than ever. "We defend the mechanic. We defend the beast. And this time, we do it together." Jarek stood on the lower steps of the palace. He didn't run, didn't hide. He stood still, one hand resting on Snowfire's back. As the first wave of ships appeared, Snowfire rose with a growl that shook the gates. Guards formed ranks behind him. Old enemies from rival noble houses now stood together, and, behind them, came the people, mechanics, farmers, teachers, children, no swords in hand, just eyes full of belief. Tarn Zek's voice crackled over the speaker. "Give me the beast, give me the human, or we burn it all." Jarek stepped forward. He didn't shout. He simply said, "Try." Then Snowfire let out one long, rising howl, and across the valley, other howls answered, from caves, from cliffs, from old bunkers once forgotten. Dozens of sacred beasts, those once abandoned, had returned, drawn not by command, not by chains, but by Snowfire's cry. The rogue army hesitated, then faltered, then broke. By dusk, the threat was gone. Not a war, not a battle, just a choice. Again, Later, the Empress stood beside Jarek on the palace balcony. "You never wanted this," she said. "No," he replied. "But maybe it needed to happen." She nodded slowly. "Maybe you were never just a mechanic," she said. He turned to her, tired but calm. "And maybe Snowfire was never just a beast." They looked out over the city, quiet again, together. Years from now, children across the stars would whisper the tale, not of a king, not of a warlord, but of a quiet mechanic. And the beast with eyes like fire and snow, they would say, he didn't ride a throne, he walked beside it. He didn't conquer beasts, he healed them. And the deadliest creature of the Empire bowed to his kindness. Jarek stood on the cliff edge, wind brushing through his hair. Below him, the city of Jarian glowed with life, not fear. Beside him sat Snowfire, older now but just as proud. They had no palace, no guards, only peace. And that was enough. But even peace leaves shadows behind. The Empress, Varela, now called simply Lady Varela, had vanished after the last battle. Some said she went to a mountain temple. Some said she wandered into the stars. Only Jarek knew the truth. She had gone to ask forgiveness from the beasts she once commanded, and Snowfire had forgiven her. But the scars, they remained. A small girl approached Jarek one evening. Her eyes were wide. Her hands held a cracked toy. "Is it true?" she asked. "You made the wolf obey with stories?" Jarek smiled. "No," she blinked. "Then how?" "I didn't make him obey," he said gently. "I just stopped telling him what to be." In the years that followed, the sanctuary of the sacred beast was born, built in the valley where rogue armies once marched. Here wounded creatures, genetically built for war, found safety. Not cages, not control, just rest. And at its heart stood two figures carved in pure crystal, a human with grease on his hands, and an albino wolf, eyes glowing red, head bowed in peace. When the galaxy sent envoys to understand the new Zarian era, they didn't ask to see generals or ministers. They asked, "Where is the man the beast chose?" Jarek always answered the same way, "I'm just a mechanic." But to the people, he was something else. He was proof that even fire and ice could melt into something warm. One day an old ship landed in the valley. Its wings were scarred. Its engine hummed unevenly. A cloaked figure stepped out, slow, quiet, but with purpose. "Lady." Varela returned. She walked up the slope, past dragons, past wolves, past children who no longer ran from claws or teeth. And she found Jarek sitting under a sun tree, repairing a child's music box. She sat beside him in silence. After a long pause, she said, "You gave me back something I didn't know I lost." He didn't ask what. She didn't explain. Snowfire came forward and placed his head between them both. The three sat there, once ruler, once outsider, once weapon, now family. In the sky above, the twin moons glowed softly. Jarek stood and looked toward the stars. One child tugged at his hand. "Will you ever leave?" she asked. He shook his head. "No. My place is here." The child looked at Snowfire. "And him?" Jarek smiled. "He goes where I go. And somewhere, in a far library, orbiting a peaceful world, a teacher read from a golden book. Once there was a man who fixed machines. He found a creature built to destroy. But instead of fear, he gave it friendship. Instead of orders, he gave it freedom. And the beast chose him. Not because it had to, but because it wanted to. The students listened quietly. Then one raised her hand. Was the story true? The teacher smiled. She looked out the window, where a white wolf-shaped star burned bright near the twin moons, and she whispered, "Yes, it was true. It all began with a man who didn't see a monster. He saw a soul."